Today's project is Simplicity 8919. It's just a simple raglan top. It comes with 5 different sleeve options though, so you can have a long sleeve, a short sleeve, an elbow length sleeve, almost a 3/4, a short sleeve with elastic, and a butterfly sleeve. But it's the same bodice throughout. This is meant for knits. I'm doing it in this really adorable red polka dot. And the only other thing you're going to need as far as notions go is elastic. This can be completely sewn on the sewing machine if you have a zigzag option. Otherwise, you can do it with sewing machine and serger, which is what I'm going to be doing today. Make sure when you choose your fabric that you look at the little guide on the back, unstretched. Your fabric should be this, you take a piece of fabric and hold it up here, and then you stretch, and it should go all the way to here. If it doesn't, you don't have enough stretch in that knit. So that's why it gives you the stretch guide for you. And most knits are wide. Very seldom do you find a knit that's 45 inches wide. It's usually 60, and it only gives measurements for 60 inch. So the double extra large view A, that's with a long sleeve, takes less than 2 yards of fabric. I'm going to be doing the short sleeve, so I only need 1 yard and 1/8. I'm probably going to need a little bit more because I'm going to lengthen it a little bit. I always need a little length. So I'm going to go trace off my pattern since it has all the sizes available in one. I probably will make this again for somebody else in a different size, or even for myself in a different size. Then I'll show you the layout. It's going to be really straightforward, and then we'll be back here at the sewing machine. When laying this out, you're going to have 2 folds. So you're going to take your edges and fold them to the middle, and you want to fold it just wide enough to get the widest part of your pattern on the fold, and this is the way you're going to get a double fold. Like this. So instead of leaving it folded in half. The nice thing is if your fabric ends up having a pretty solid crease from being on the bolt too long, it won't show up in your garment. So once you've cut your 2 bodices, then you will refold it in half to cut out the sleeve, because you can see the sleeve's just too wide. So then we'll refold it and cut the sleeve out. So you're going to have to, you can't put every pattern piece on and cut it once. You're going to have to cut out bodices and then come back and cut out the sleeve. But I widened and lengthened. I have 2 yards of fabric, so I have plenty. But even if I hadn't had extra fabric, I could have, for the XXL, with a little bit of tweaking, I still could have gotten it out of the 1 yard and 1/8. Step 1, they have you turn down 5/8 of an inch. This is for our casing, and then tuck back underneath a little less than 1/4 of an inch. And this is what you're going to stitch down right along this edge to make your first casing, which is great. If you don't want to do it that way, you could serge this edge, fold it back your 5/8, stitch your 1/2 inch. This is a much neater and finished look. So if you have a soft knit like this one, it'll work great. If you have a super heavy knit, this is going to be a little difficult in just that it's going to make it bulky for gathering, but I don't think this is a pattern that you would be using a heavy knit on anyway. So you can press this gently on a low setting. This particular one is synthetic. If it's cotton, it can take a higher setting at your iron if you want to press it. I'm just going to go ahead and pin it down like this and stitch it. Normally I stitch from the right side, but because we're stitching so close to this edge, I think I will stitch with the wrong side up just to make sure I don't have any little errors and miss anything. So you can see how it looks turned up. This is the wrong side and this is the right side, and now I'm ready to take it to the sewing machine and stitch right along this edge. Straight stitch. This is what it looks like on the right side, and that's what it looks like on the wrong side. And you're going to do this for the front and the back, and then we're going to feed our elastic through. Now, I've told you this before, but when I do elastic, I don't cut out the little elastic measure guide that's included in the pattern. Instead, I just write it down on a scrap. So I wrote down the bodice elastic front and back is 11 5/8, and the sleeve elastic is 13 5/8. And I'm not having to cut out that pattern piece or worry about it, and I can come back and just cut my little elastic pieces. So once you get your front and your back sewn, and it looks pretty like this, then we're ready to fish through our elastic. And so that step 1 is making the casing. Step 2 is fishing the elastic through for the front and the back. And then step 3, they have us sewing our front and our back together. So I'm going to go ahead and fish my elastic through. The easy way to do it, grab a safety pin, and we're going to take one end of our pin, poke it through the edge of our elastic, and that makes it much easier to fish it through our casing. So here's my casing, and let me turn it towards you. We're going to take our little safety pin and we're just going to poke it through the casing. And your casing should be about 1/2 inch, between 3/8 and 1/2, and your elastic is 1/4, so it should slide through pretty easily, and it just slides in. And what you want to do, the elastic is shorter than your front, than your bodice front. So you don't want to pull straight through, or you'll just pull the elastic end in too far and it won't work. So what you want to do is you get close, when your elastic edge is getting close to the edge of your casing here on the end. See how much I've fished through? Pin down this elastic on this end. All right, so here we are. There I am, and now I'm holding it. I've got just a little tiny hair there, and I'm going to pin it down. The other thing you want to make sure you do when you're doing this is that this elastic does not twist, that it stays nice and flat all the way across. If your elastic twists, it's uncomfortable to wear, but it shows through. It'll actually look like a little lump in your casing, and you don't want a lump in your casing. Okay, so here I am coming out the other end. So got a pin on this end so it won't pull it through, and there it is on the other end, and you can see the gathers. I can flip it to this side. See the little gathers? And now I can make sure you don't let that elastic fall to the inside. I'm going to take my safety pin out. I'm going to make them even with each other, and I'm going to put a pin in this one. So now I have a pin in both sides. This is my front little bodice, ready to go. I'm going to do the same thing to the back. It's identical. The main thing, the front and the back are similar, but they're not exactly the same. The front's a little higher for a good reason than the back. So you want to make sure you can tell your front from your back when you're putting these together. It does make a difference. Also, if you're going to put a tag in your garment, you would want to tuck your tag in this little back part of your casing if you want it in that area. Otherwise, if it were me, I'd probably put it in the side seam in a garment like this. I just think it's always more comfortable there anyway. Some way for you to be able to tell your front from your back is important. You can also put it in like the shoulder seam back here in the sleeve. It's going to be a lot less annoying there too, and won't show through on your garment as much. All right, back in a minute to put our front and our back to each other. The next step is to put our front to our back together at the side seams. I've pinned it. Here's my, maybe hard to see, but here they are. There's the pins. And the direction sheet says just straight stitch it down on your 5/8 inch line. But I'm going to tell you, if you're working with a knit and you just straight stitch it, the minute you put that on and you put any pressure against those seams, they're going to pop and you're going to have little holes in your seam. So it would be better if you're not using an overlock, a serger machine, at your sewing machine to set it for a really small zigzag so that it's got some nice little space, but it's not real wide. And from the outside, it's still going to look like a straight stitch, but that seam is going to give when you're taking it on and off, and you're going to be much happier, and you're not going to end up with little holes and pop stitches from having a straight stitch in a knit. So if you're going to your sewing machine, we're going to sew our front to our back on a 5/8 inch seam. If you're using this at your overlock, same thing, 5/8 inch, you're going to, at the overlock, you will serge off just a tiny bit of your excess seam allowance. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'll show you what that looks like. There it is. Nice, stretchy seam. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the other one, and then we start our sleeve. This is going so fast. We're now going to be turning under for our sleeve. Here's my sleeve. You can see it's quite a dramatic little sleeve cap there where the shoulder seam is. These little circles are really important. I'm pulling my pins out. So I've marked on my actual sleeve my notches so I can find them again. And then these little things let us know where to start and stop for our casings. That's what those little circles are for, and they're really important. So let me just peel off one of these. So I'm only working with one sleeve at a time. They're going to have, we're doing the exact same thing. We're going to go from that circle, and we're folding back 5/8 of an inch. And then from that 5/8, we're going to tuck back under, and we're going to top stitch to make a casing. It's just going to be a little more tricky because we're working with the curve. Before, we had a pretty straight seam. So I'm going to start pinning this in and show you how that looks on a curve. I just want you to see, can you see the fullness here? I kind kind of go like this. Can you see that? See how that's sort of wavy? This is my first fold over for the 5/8 of an inch. And it's a little bit wavy, and it should be because we've got convex and concave curve things happening here and they don't all match up. And then after we get this first line pinned out, the nice thing is working with knit, and knit stretches and forgives. We're going to tuck this under and pin some more. So it's okay if you have to do a little, and I mean it literally looks like this. You're moving your fabric around a little bit to ease it in and out, but there's my one dot on that side. Here's my dot on this side. That's where that pin is, so I don't go past it, so that I can start getting my casing together for my sleeve. And if you do not mark your notches, you will not know which is your right and your left sleeve, and they may not go in properly. So it's not real pretty before it's stitched. You can see the rippliness of it, but once it's stitched, and I would recommend just giving it a slight stretch as you stitch it. It's going to make everything fall in place better. But there it is, folded up and ready to go. And here it is stitched. You can see it looks a little wavy. That's the right side. It looks better on the right side. And that's just because there's a lot of extra fabric going in there. I'm going to add the elastic now, and you'll be able to see how pretty it looks with the elastic. But it actually looks pretty good from the right side. Okay, we've done step 1, which was our casing. We've done step 2, which was put the elastic through the casing for the bodices. Step 3 was to sew the front and back bodice together on the side seams. Step 4 was to do our sleeve casing, which we've done. Step 5 was to put the elastic through. Ta-da! So this is very same sort of thing. So here's our little sleeve. It's going to be so cute. So we'll put the elastic through. Step 6 is to do our underarm seam of our sleeves. So that's this little part right here. We're going to put right sides together. And the underarm is not this part. That's where it gets sewn onto the shirt. It's this little tiny short part right here. So we're going to sew these 2 little bits. Now, depending on how you're hemming, you could go ahead and hem your sleeve at this point if you want to. I'm going to do, for my shirt and my sleeve, I'm going to do a cover stitch on my Overlock machine. If you're not, go ahead and hem now. You can hem it now if you want to. You don't have to, but certainly you could if you want to. So we're going to do this. Let me put these together really quickly. And then once we've done this, we're actually going to set the sleeve into the arm side. There's one sleeve. This is my bodice. Sleeve number 2. Now I made sure to pin down my elastics so they don't go creeping on me. You could also go to your sewing machine and do a little stitch to stitch down those elastics on this in the seam allowance to make them stay put. Now if you're doing the longer sleeve version, it'll take a little more time than this, but these are quick. Okay, here's our little sleeve sewn. It's our little tiny stitch. This is what it looks like. And we're going to take right side sleeve to right side garment and match them up. And that's why we marked our little notches. So here's the back of my sleeve. I want to do back sleeve to back bodice. So, ta-da, ta-da. And remember, seam finishes, kind of, your seam allowance pokes to the back. So I'm going to put some pins in, starting at the underarm. Now there's no sleeve cap on this. We're only doing, because it's raglan, so the sleeve is only going to sew to about here. It's going to catch the elastic on both sides. Okay. So here's my 2 little elastic pieces, and then there's the sleeve, and we'll just pin it in, and it's a little U. You're just going to sew that. That is step 6. Because they have us sew where our joints come together right here, you just have like a seam there. And what I'm going to do is, and I do this all the time, after it's stitched and finished, I'm going to push that seam to one direction and just top stitch it down just a little bit to make it stay put. And I'm going to actually top stitch along my seam line where my casing is. And I'll show you what that looks like in a close-up here in a minute. But that's our sleeve pinned in, so I'm going to go ahead and sew that U real quick, and I'll show you what they look like finished. Just a quick close-up of the sleeve pinned in. This is what it looks like. Here's the little elasticy parts. And I'm ready just to sew this little U at my overlock. So before going to the overlock machine, I, right at the elastic parts, just did a quick little straight stitch just through that little area, And that's going to keep my elastic from moving or falling out while I'm stitching. It's got my perfect 5/8 inch line already just for that little spot. And I did it at both ends of my sleeve where my elastic is so that it just holds everything down. It's just sort of like a little tailor's tack done at the sewing machine to make it a little easier as I transition over here to the overlock to put the sleeve in. So now that the sleeve is on, I have turned my seam allowance to one side and I am just stitching back over my casing lines to hold that little seam allowance down, and it just makes it look nice and flat up here where those two seams to come together, and make it look a little more polished. I have my sleeves in, as you can see, and I'm trying it on to see how I like the fit, because when I was measuring the elastic out, I thought the elastic was too long in this sleeve and I was afraid it wasn't going to fit right. And it fits like the pattern shows. It's kind of lowish, like it does cover the cleavage, but you can see how wide the neck is. It's fine if you want to wear it down. It's plenty stretchy, and for me, I don't think it's tight enough. I've actually already stitched down my seams here, but I'm going to rip them out. And I'm going to tighten up this elastic because I know I will not be wearing it like this. It just wants to fall down, and I'm not going to be comfortable with that. I want a tighter elastic up here in the sleeve. This is fine here. It all could be smaller though, and this elastic I think was 13.5, something like that for this sleeve, and I'm gonna probably take out, I don't know, 2 inches maybe. It has a really high, sleeve, so you can see this is what it looks like, but because of how it's done, it kind of does some weird bunchy things, and I think having this a little tighter will make those bunchy things look intentional. So it's a nice pattern, it's fine, but for me, and this is what you need to do, don't stitch these down like I did. I stitched my seams down too soon until you try it on so that you can adjust that elastic. So I'm going to have to rip out right here, pull the elastic in on both sleeves and restitch it to make it fit right. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back for hemming. Okay, I have edited this side. I've pulled out 3 inches in the sleeve in the back here. So you can kind of see how this neckline goes like this. This is the old neckline, and it's just too big. And here's the new neckline, and I think 3 inches is about right. I almost kind of wish I had even taken some out of the neck here. But this is often an issue when you're full-sized, is that the necks are bigger than you want. It's the grading thing, but a lot of times I feel like I need this part needs just to be smaller, and I usually will take in the elastic more. I'm going to link another raglan sleeve top that I made that's a little more traditional, sort of peasant style blouse that I love. Fits amazingly. I also like the way it's sewn together better than this one where you have your elastic done in pieces. It's much easier to alter the other one as far as to get this neckline to fit right. So I'm going to link it wherever it shows up here, and you can give it a try. It's a daisy top. It's one of my very favorite shirts I've made. I wear it all the time, and I'm definitely making it in other fabrics. It just may not show up on here. I'm going to fix this other sleeve, and then we'll do hems. I'm all pinned up for my hems. There's my sleeve. Here's the bottom hem, and I'm just going to take it to my overlock and do a cover stitch hem on this. If you are doing it at your sewing machine, now you will just top stitch it. If you're doing it at your sewing machine, you might consider doing like you've done everywhere else and go ahead and fold up that extra little bit right here and catch it kind of like you did so that you have a finished edge. You could also, if you're not doing a cover stitch, you could serge this edge and then stitch it at your sewing machine. So you have lots of options when it comes to the hem. Finished. I'm glad I took in the elastic a little bit. I think it just needed a couple inches out. I also removed a little bit of elastic in the back and just tightened it up a little bit. I probably could have done it everywhere. I think I could have lost an inch of elastic front, inch of elastic back, and about almost 3 inches in the sleeve to get this fit. And you can see the neckline's not too high. It is a wide neck. I can tell I'm going to have a hard time keeping my bra straps from showing, and I'll probably have to do a little trick to pin my bra strap to it, or make one of those little loops that holds your bra strap in to keep it in place. But it's cute. It is now, I'm looking at it is 12:30. I started this about 9 o'clock. So 3.5 hours total, and that's with me making alterations, stopping to film and talk to you, and do a few other things in between, like letting the dog in and out. So pretty fast little project. I traced my pattern and everything off today, so I did no pre-work today before starting this. So, all right, I'll see you next week for another fun video.